You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello, everyone. I am Mari Fagel, my co-host. Apparently,
it's like several Maris, right?
Yeah, that was cool. That was me showing up several times. As I was trying to say, I am your host, Mari Fagel, joined by my lovely co-host, Ebony Williams. This is Justice is Served, and we're just going to jump right into it.
Yeah.
Our case of the week this week. I emailed you about this, Ebony, when I read about it Monday morning, and I said this has to be our first discussion this week.
Sure.
It's the shooting death of Jonathan Ferrell. And when I read this case, I was outraged and very, very sad for this family, because I think the events leading up to this man's death, this young man's death, should shock everyone. He was a former football player for FAMU.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he got into a car accident around 2:30 a.m. Saturday morning. His car went off the road. He was able to escape one near-death experience.
Right.
He had to break out the back window of his car in order to escape. He walked a half mile to the closest home and began banging on the door of the neighbor who he found. I understand that this neighbor may have been frightened. She opened up the door expecting it to be her husband and saw a stranger standing there 3 a.m. in the morning, and she was frightened. I understand that. She called the police for a break and enter. What happened next is what has me outraged, because he was obviously just trying to seek help. And he was walking towards her pool, and the cops stopped him. And luckily, I want to get your opinion on this, because luckily we have the dashboard video of what happened next. He was approaching them, obviously for help. He had just gotten into a car accident, was approaching them, was unarmed, no criminal record. He was approaching them and wouldn't stop when they said stop. They tased him. Okay. Then one of the officers, Randall Carrick, shot at him 12 times. 10 of the shots hit him, and he died at the scene. So this is also a story from North Carolina, where you practiced as a public defender. So I want to ask you what your initial comments are on this case.
Yeah, Mari. I mean, I think to say this hits close to home for me would be an understatement. Not only did I practice law in North Carolina, I'm from North Carolina. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I grew up in this city. And it just absolutely shocks my consciousness that an officer in any capacity would think it justifiable to shoot at any person 12 times, least of all someone who is unarmed. And have this type of result. So a lot of legal complexities here in this issue. And I guess one of the first things we want to start with is some of the way in which this, because of course this happens and immediately people think of Trayvon Martin and they think about another young black man seemingly senselessly killed. One of the things that distinguishes this case already from the Zimmerman and Martin case is the fact that there was an immediate arrest here. What we saw that did make me a little satisfied was a very immediate response from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. And you have the chief of that department, Rodney Monroe, who I dealt with during my time in Charlotte. He'd just been appointed chief of police there in Charlotte, having an immediate response, immediately coming out publicly and saying that the police department was not supporting the actions of this officer, and that they were saying that it indeed, in their eyes, was unjustifiable. Now, we're going to talk later. We're going to be joined with a very special guest, the man who is representing the family of the deceased here, representing the Ferrell family. His name is Attorney Christopher Chestnut, and Chris represents many high-profile wrongful death cases, including, again, dealing with FAMU, the wrongful death of a student who was hazed to death there a couple of years ago. So we're going to get Chris's take, who's also seen the video, and he has some interesting things to offer. But again, the justifiableness, I see them struggling to make that argument, Mari. And that's ultimately what this case turns on. Now, when we initially reached out, because I really wanted to speak with someone from the district attorney's office in Charlotte, this case has actually been turned over from the district attorney's office, and it will be handled by the state attorney general's office. And that's really important because, and we'll get Attorney Chestnut's opinions on his take on that too. There's a reason why. As soon as I saw it, before I read the reasoning, because that's now come out, but I knew it. I knew that there was an issue of a possibility of a conflict of interest. When you're talking about a district attorney's office and a police department, they're separate entities, but when you get in the courtroom, you see they work very closely, hand in hand. Oftentimes, when I would go into the courtroom as either a public defender or a private defense lawyer, you would see the DAs talking with their officers and not necessarily collaborating, but in a way, making sure that, the officer is instructed the DA on the facts of the cases. They see it and the DA kind of goes accordingly. When you've got that close of a relationship, Maury, between your prosecutor's office and your police department on a daily basis, that's going to give some great concern to the outside community because it could look like impropriety. It could look like a conflict of interest. And luckily, the Charlotte Mecklenburg District Attorney, Andrew Murray, he had the foresight to know that and say, you know what, this is a high profile, it's a national profile case. People are watching what we're doing with this very closely. I don't even want the appearance of impropriety. So that's why I'm having Roy Cooper, the Attorney General, step in.
And it's not even that they work so closely hand in hand at the present time. It's that the district attorney, the law firm that he worked for prior to being elected, is the law firm that is currently representing the police officer in this case. So that is the issue of impropriety as well. And so there are certain things.
As well, though, but I do want to say that for us, when you walk into a courtroom and you've got your DAs and your officers talking on a daily basis, because that's the reality. That's what's going on in these courtrooms every day, Mari. And people do get concerned about that because it does look like, is this a gang up type of situation? And because of that, yes, you're absolutely right. Andrew Murray's actual firm was involved here, so it's even more so. But for that, even if not, I still think the move would have been to take this to the AG's office.
And that's why there are two things that I commend in that he was charged so fast, because this just happened on Saturday morning, and charges we already saw were filed Monday. And also the AG's office is handling it so that there is no issue of impropriety. So I think that they're on the right path towards justice, but I think that I want to ask the attorney when he calls in, I think the video, the dashboard cam, will be key because there have been reports that his hands, that Jonathan Ferrell's hands were up.
Right.
So he was walking towards them with his hands up. And I can only imagine that he was asking for help. I understand they said stop. But what happened between tasing him and then using an actual gun to shoot at him 12 times. And so,
well, and that's why, again, the justification argument to me fails, because in order for this to be valid, an officer can use deadly force. He absolutely can, if and only if he can make a convincing case that he felt he was in reasonable apprehension of imminent harm or danger himself. I don't know how this officer can even begin to make that argument when you've got an unarmed man, even if he didn't stop on command, as you said. And we'll see the video and we'll get different interpretations because they are seeming to be some conflicting reports concerning whether or not this man did stop on command. But even if he didn't, there's no weapon. What type of imminent harm do you feel like you're in that would justify 12 shots?
And, the NAACP this week commended the quick charges, but they also said that they think it comes down to an issue of race because this woman opened up her door 2:30 in the morning, saw a black man standing at her door. The cops saw a black man on her property walking further in her property towards the pool. And the question has to be asked, if this was a white person, would it have gone this far? Would this have happened? So it's sad that we have to have this dialogue over and over and over again. But I think, like you said, we have at least learned a lesson from Trayvon Martin's death in that charges were brought so fast as opposed to several months. I
agree. I mean, I think that's a good takeaway. But let me ask you, Mari, obviously, as a white person, when you first read this story, was the issue of race, did that lens immediately come to mind for you?
Yes, in that, why else, if I came running to a woman's door at 2:30 in the morning and I said, I just got into a car crash, I need help, please call the police, I need help, I'm injured.
Right. She's probably not going to go pick up her phone and say someone's breaking in and entering into my property.
Yes,
Point
and
taken.
I'm not faulting her. I
Right.
am faulting the police for
Of
the
course.
provocation of what happened.
Of course.
So I'm not faulting her for the initial call. I understand, even if a white man was standing at your door at 2:30 in the morning banging on the door viciously, and you think it's your husband and then you realize it's not, but I just think that what happened wouldn't have happened if it was a white person.
Well, I totally agree, particularly when it comes to the actions of this officer. And I think this is this greater thing that probably troubled you when you first read the story. I know troubled me and many others. It's this kind of notion that when the suspect is a black man, particularly a young black man in this country, the mode of operation seems to be shoot first, ask questions later. And that is costing us dearly in terms of lives of young black men in this country. And, you talked about in the intro of the case, Mari, this is not just some common street thug, as they tried to eventually paint young Trayvon Martin. This is a guy who's 24 years old. He's a college graduate. He played football at the University of Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. He worked 2 jobs. He was engaged to be married, had just moved to Charlotte 1 year ago. And again, I'm laying out all these facts like this because...
And no criminal record.
Of course, no criminal record. I mean, this is the American dream. You know what I'm saying? Seriously. And this is how, when we get attorney
He wanted
Chris
to be an
Chestnut,
automotive engineer.
yeah, on the phone, it's very important. And I just want to break down some of the legal players in this game. So Chris Chestnut, he's someone I've known personally for 10 years. I knew him back when he was a second-year law student. He knew me before I even attended law school. He's a fantastic trial attorney. Again, stellar reputation for representing people in wrongful death. And I think it's very important that Chris, who is a young black man himself, relatively speaking, is representing this family, because he will be able to really speak to the personification of this young man, of Jonathan Ferrell. And that's something that I felt like was blatantly and erroneously absent when we talk about the Trayvon Martin case. Trayvon was never personalized in a way that jurors could connect to. And that's very important, Mari. I can't even underestimate how important it is for the jurors to understand the wrongfulness of the death, because they can connect with the victim.
I think in the Trayvon Martin case, they tried. If you remember, the first witness called to the stand was the little boy who was with Trayvon Martin that night before he left. I think it was the boy who he was playing games with before he left to go to the 7-Eleven store, to go to the store. He was the first one on the stand, and it kind of personalized it. He was just, doing kid things that night. I think they tried, but they failed. I think
they needed to do way more.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's really important when you're talking about this, because you've got to get the jurors to see how unreasonable these officers' actions were. In the case of George Zimmerman's actions were, and that's really important. Likewise, though, the officers, when police officers are charged by this, our listeners and viewers should know, they have a bureau that basically kind of supports their legal representation for them. And the firm that was hired to do the representation for this officer, I know both of these lawyers. They're both great lawyers. George LaRoe and also Michael Green. George, he's a fantastic criminal defense lawyer. Michael Green is actually a black man. Very important. And I'm not race baiting when I say this. I'm saying that to say that it's going to be important for this young white officer who has gunned down an innocent young black boy, in order for them to try to, take this argument away from the racial framework. It's very important that a black attorney is going to be standing in front of those jurors to make that argument for this white officer. And because people are visual, and that's very, very important.
And I also think in terms of telling the story, and we'll talk to Chris Chestnut about this, the facts are in his favor in that Trayvon Martin, there was so much of the emphasis on the Skittles and iced tea. What happened leading up to it was so innocent. What happened leading up to this was what got me outraged. He escaped a near-death experience only to die.
Yeah.
And that's what was so hard for me. I mean, his car ran off the road, and, we're not sure what happened leading up to the accident and why that accident happened, but he had to kick out a back window in his car and walk a half mile to help. And that's what when I was reading that, that's what broke my heart, is that he struggled and was seeking help and then died. And that the facts leading up to it, I think, that portrayal will also help the jury,
Well, I think that, and also the fact that there's video. I mean, I think
That'll be the key. I think
Yeah.
that'll be the key
Yeah.
to the case and to the
think-
verdict.
Yeah, I mean,
But
because I think that's ultimately why the Zimmerman verdict came out that way. No one
there was
knew.
only ear witnesses, essentially.
No one knew. No one knew exactly what transpired between those two individuals. Here, there is a video. We know a lot more, and I just don't see this. And again, I know these lawyers, Mari. They're very, very good. I mean, they're some of the best Charlotte has to offer. But it's still an argument that you've got to make that's reasonable in force. And I don't see anything about an unarmed young man, probably screaming for help, as you said, probably hands up. Even if not, even if he kept coming and didn't stop on command, what about that put Officer Carrick in the mindset of, I'm not only in reasonable danger of some type of harm, but the harm is so great that it justifies deadly force.
12 times. Deadly force 12 times.
Yes, that's the bar.
And the video will be key because jurors like something more tangible. In a
Sure.
lot of these cases where there are acquittals, it's because jurors in this CSI era, they want something that they can really hold on to. DNA evidence, things like that. And when you have
Ballistics, forensics.
Yes, and
yes.
the Trayvon Martin case, it was a lot of circumstantial evidence, and here there is a video that they can watch and they can decide for themselves. Even if different people, different witnesses are coming up to explain what happened, they have video of what happened, and I really think that will be key. And when that video will be released for the public to see and to make up our own judgments, we'll see.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's remiss to also point out again that the actual chief of police in Charlotte, Rodney Monroe, has come out and said on behalf of the department, they don't believe these actions were reasonable. Now, it's not determinative, but if you had a police department backing the officer's actions, saying, well, this is how we train them, this is a circumstance where a reasonable officer on my force would have acted accordingly or similarly, that can be persuasive to jurors. You don't have that here. You've got this chief of police saying, you know what? That's out of bounds. That is not anything that we train. That is not anything that any other officer on this task force would have been expected to do. And that also will go to sully the argument that anything about this officer's actions was justifiable, because his own chief of police is not even supporting his actions. It's not good. It's really not good. I will also say the fact that the AG has stepped in and Roy Cooper will be handling this from the Attorney General's office. There are a lot more resources when you're dealing with the Attorney General's office. That's a state level operation there. It's going to be a much more thorough case than we would have seen in Charlotte Mecklenburg. And Charlotte is the biggest city in North Carolina. They do have the most resources, and it's a pretty efficient run jurisdiction, but nothing beats the state's level of operation. So I'm very happy to see the AG step in, and that's how important this case is. That's how high profile it is. And I think that there are lots of people watching this case across the country because they don't want to see, a repeat of some of the missteps that we saw in Zimmerman trial.
And another case that it reminds me of, with even more egregious facts here, is the Rodney King case. And so 20 years ago that happened, obviously, and so we'll see how far the nation has come in terms of having a discussion about it, in the reactions to it once the trial takes place, once the verdict takes place.
Right.
I think there will be those comparisons as well,
I think so. I think there'll definitely be
especially for
comparisons
people in
there.
Los Angeles who were here for the riots and remember exactly what happened.
Yeah. And again, ultimately, whether it's Rodney King, whether it's Trayvon Martin's death, or in this case, Jonathan Burrell's death, there's this overarching conversation about, at least within the Black community for many people, the value of the Black life. That's ultimately what this comes down to in an emotional way. And I think people are just ready for there to be some type of public statement that says it's a value. It's a value. And when you take that life, there's a consequence for it. And that's why I think why so many people were so heartbroken by the Zimmerman outcome. And I understand it legally. I felt like I understand how the jurors got there. But I also understand how empty that verdict felt for people, because a young boy lost his life still. And there was ultimately no accountability for that. And that feels unequal, that feels unjust, and that's really the rub.
a young boy lost his life, and the man who is acquitted has continued to flaunt his lack of values. And what I'm talking about is, I talked about this on my Spreecast, my Wild About Trial Spreecast last week, was George Zimmerman and the domestic violence dispute between him and his soon-to-be ex-wife. And the things that he has done since the acquittal. He went to a gun facility,
Right.
the same gun he used to shoot Trayvon Martin. He went to that gun facility, and there's pictures of him posing with an employee there. Do you know how disrespectful that is? Even if he was acquitted, even if he is innocent in the eyes of the law, that is so disrespectful. And he just doesn't know how to stay undercover and
don't
keep
think he-
quiet. Casey Anthony, we have not heard from
Yeah.
at all. I'm not saying she's a good person, but at least she has remained under the eyes of the public and the media. And George Zimmerman keeps coming up and up and up. 2 traffic tickets, fine, speeding, gun in the dashboard. Breaking and smashing your ex-wife's or your soon-to-be ex-wife's iPad, and, there were issues about whether he had a gun with him and whether he was threatening his father-in-law with the gun. But,
I think the distinction, though, Maury, is I don't think George Zimmerman felt like he did anything wrong. After all this that we've been
He's a
through with him.
vigilante.
Yeah, I mean, he honestly feels like, I'm sure if we called him in here today, he would say he felt like he did that neighborhood a service that night. He got rid of them that always get away with it. I mean, let's look at his language, for God's sakes. And I don't think we ever saw him move from that position at no time. He never testified. I mean, I never saw a bit of remorse from him. And so I think that's why we're still seeing this action from him. And there are a lot of people just like that, Maury, that still feel that way, that look at young people, particularly young black and brown boys in this country, as menaces to society. And going to your point about how far we've come, 20 years from Rodney King, that was a prevalent viewpoint then, and clearly it's a prevalent viewpoint now.
Clearly, it is a prevalent viewpoint now because, and we'll go back to Jonathan Ferrell's death when our caller calls in.
Yes.
But talking about Trayvon Martin,
Yes.
I brought up a story a couple weeks ago about Christopher Lane and this editorial
Right.
of, if I had a son, would he look like Chris Lane? That for some reason, Obama's statement, if I had a son, would he look like Trayvon Martin? People have just hinged onto that and used that in different circumstances.
Right.
This week, the Navy Yard shooting killed 13 people. Aaron Alexis.
Yes.
Yes, he was a black man.
Yes.
But more importantly, he had mental health issues. The problem here is there was an internet meme, a Twitter meme going around of if Obama had a son, he would look like Aaron Alexis.
Right.
And that is problematic. And Don Lemon, the CNN anchor,
Yes.
had a conversation about this because the focus should not be on race here. The focus should be on his mental health issues.
Right.
This man who was so mentally deranged that he shot 13 innocent people and killed them. He shot more than that, but killed 13 people. And I think that Don Lemon's points about mental health and how the African American community in specific needs to deal with it is a very interesting question, which is why it's our tipping the scales of the week of do you think the African American community should more directly tackle mental health issues, not just mass shooters, not just Aaron Alexis, Christopher Dorner, but also suicide, Lee Thompson Young, Don Cornelius.
Absolutely. Also, many, I would say, too, because I talked about this on my radio show a couple of weeks ago, Martin. I had a special guest, a psychiatrist, who also happened to be a black man, come on and talk about the stigma associated with mental health in the black community, and that being the primary reason that we don't address it. And oftentimes that's connected to this dichotomy that many in the black community feel exists between mental health and its assessment and treatment and religion. And for many in the black community, those things can't coexist. And so if you believe in God and you believe in spirituality, then you have to pray away these mental demons. And we're seeing that that's clearly not working. And also, again, with many of my clients, they dealt with dual diagnosis, Mara. These are people that were using substance abuse to treat undiagnosed and untreated mental illness. And that is also very prevalent, not just in the black community, but certainly in it as well.
And I think just in crime in general, black, white, whatever, it's mental health that we need to tackle. And our guest last week, Akila Sherrills, His son died at the hands of gang violence. He doesn't want the murderer who is still out there to be imprisoned and sent to death. He wants that man to be rehabilitated. Right. And the problem is there's so many resources going towards imprisonment and execution. And those resources could be going to in-prison rehabilitation and mental health facilities and programs to stop recidivism rates, to stop these things. And so I think mental health, black, white, whatever the issue is the underlying issue in so much of crime. And I want to read a quote by Don Lemon that he said on his show. If we don't wake up to these realities being the realities of mental health issues, that we cannot pray it away, the next time we see a crime on the news, especially a mass shooting, the first question you might ask yourself, is it the usual one? Oh no, are they black? You know you all do it. I hope they're not black. It might be the same one that the haters are posing on the internet right now. If Obama had a son, would he look like the killer? And I think that that's a strong statement because he took what became a terrible internet meme, but was able to get people to understand the underlying issue of mental health. So again, our tipping the scales question of the week is, do you think the African American community in particular needs to address mental health issues more directly as opposed to, religion, praying it away, different types of things? Do you think that would make a difference in terms of crime in the criminal justice system?
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what the results are on that, Mara. I mean, I will be very vocal in saying that I think it's critical.
I don't think it's a race issue. That was kind of the problem. I mean, I think it's good that he's bringing it up. I don't think it's a race issue. I think the white community too, everyone needs to address mental health.
Yes, Mara, that's true. But I will tell you the difference is, from my experience, there is a space in white communities and, just other more majority communities, Asian communities, where the stigma is just less attached. Again, and I think when you're talking about black and brown communities, because another community that deals with this disproportionately is Latino communities. Again, because many times they are overwhelmingly Catholic. There's just this religious overtone to them that makes it very difficult for them to be candid about their address of mental health. And it's costing us.
But what's interesting to me is most mass shooters are white.
Yeah, they are.
And they have mental health issues.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Aurora shooting, Newtown, Tucson, the Columbine, so many of these.
Yes.
And, there's an issue in the media of whether we should even be naming these killers by name, saying the name Aaron Alexis, whether that, provokes these mass shootings. I don't think that's the issue. And gun control, yes, that is an issue. But to me, the biggest issue in this is mental health and getting the funding to get to the root cause of these issues. And so I think that, I don't know how many times we need to have this conversation and more mass shootings to happen and happen and happen before the government and people realize that it is a mental health crisis.
Yes.
And that is what's the problem. Because yes, you can limit gun control, or you can, restrict guns and their access to guns, but there's also the argument that they can use other things if they want to. They have the access to it. The marathon bombing, if they want it, they have access to it. The real issue in my mind is mental health. I know we're going in a lot of different directions here today, getting all my views out there.
Yeah, well, they're important, and I do think there is an intersection, like you said, between the mental health and the gun control, and also again these underlying kind of racial tensions that are existing as well, and that lead us to have these questions going all the way back to the shooting death of Jonathan Ferrell and what that means about our society. Absolutely. Well, I guess we can get started running our docket. I've got a couple of interesting celebrity justice stories for you this week. We will start with rapper 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz, surprisingly, I know you can't believe this, Mari. 2 Chainz arrested for marijuana. Oh my gosh. Oklahoma City police officer pulled over a tour bus of the rapper, saying that it smelled overwhelmingly of marijuana. The driver opened the door and eventually leading to the arrest of 2 Chainz himself and also 11 other people. Talk about an entourage. So tell us, what are your thoughts on this, number one? Number two, do you think the rap industry is just glamorizing marijuana use to the point of ridiculousness? Or is this arrest going to even mean anything to that community?
My first thoughts on this was, I love the fact that someone in the entourage held up a small pocket version of the U.S. Constitution pointing to the Fourth Amendment.
Right.
And they didn't get out of the tour bus. The police could have warrantlessly searched this automobile. everyone stayed. They would not get off, and they waited several hours on this bus for the police to get a valid search warrant before searching the tour bus. So
Right.
I commend them in doing that.
Yeah.
In terms of marijuana being glorified in the rap industry, I think there's a lot more drugs that the rap industry and especially the police need to be concerned about than marijuana,
Interesting.
especially
well,
the police department.
I hate all drugs, including marijuana. I think this is really whack. Again, though, like you said, I'm surprised the officers even waited for this warrant because they didn't really need to.
No, they didn't, which is why,
Yeah.
you know, obviously the reason they did is because these 11 people weren't going anywhere.
Right.
And they did not need to. Like you said, there is an automobile exception.
Yes.
If they have probable cause but they claim that the odor
The
reeking
smell
from
is
the
probable
marijuana,
cause.
that they could
Absolutely.
have warrantlessly searched this tour bus and the passengers on the tour bus.
Oh, I guess that means it's time for us to move on to the next
I
topic.
was like, you didn't like my point.
Thank you for that, Bill.
Okay, we're trying to do something new here, a la part of the interruption, where we're trying
Right.
to do 2 minutes for every single story. So I bet you more than half the time it's going to be on me when I'm talking.
When you're talking, that's
stop.
going to bust. Okay, so moving on. I guess I don't know. Reggae pop singer Sean Kingston. This is actually pretty serious. Looking at some civil charges related to a alleged gang rape of him and some of his crew. The criminal charges concerning this were dropped when they decided that the victim was not credible, but she's now going forward with a $5 million civil suit, again alleging the forcible gang rape of Sean Kingston back in a 2010 concert, saying she was invited to Sean's hotel for a meet and greet. Once she got there, he was waiting naked on his bed, that one of his bodyguards picked her up and placed her on top of him. Then she says that Kingston and his two bodyguards raped her. And she also admitted that she was pretty intoxicated, admitting to 12 vodka shots and smoking weed, which she claims led her incapable of consent.
That to me is the key issue, and I'm wondering why there were no criminal charges, why this is a civil suit, because she went to the hospital and her injuries were consistent with rape. And when you're drunk, you cannot give consent. People have a hazy idea about this. It's clear. If you're drunk, you cannot give consent. And so the fact that this is not a criminal case, but a civil suit, in my mind, is the first strike. You know, the first sadness about this case. And you know, also the idea of fans and famous people and how far is too far. And it's just sad to me because one area where I think we have not progressed is rape. We've seen Steubenville. We've seen so many of these rape cases where there's victim blaming going on.
Well, there is, but I'll play devil's advocate to this one, Mari. The police are saying that she's got credibility issues. Now, I'm not looking at the file. Wait, hear me out. I'm not looking at the file. But I will say it's very, very difficult to charge and convict on rape.
And that's
right?
the problem.
But that's the truth, because oftentimes there's not any real evidence, and sometimes things that look like physical rape evidence sometimes could be just evidence of forcible sex, or rough sex, as they say. And a DA
But if
can't
she
go
was
to
drunk,
trial.
she can't consent.
That's fine, but we don't know what her other credibility issues are. It might not be a consent issue. If she just in general, it can be attacked on credibility, the DA is not going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Moving on, one-time roommate and friend of Lady Gaga is claiming that after she served as her personal assistant for over a year to this, I would say Gaga's probably the biggest pop star of our day, maybe rival with Beyonce. Anyway, she's claiming that Gaga cheated her out of overtime wages. She wants to tell her story to her jury. She says they can decide whether or not she was indeed owed the overtime that she is alleging. So very interesting. Looks like in terms of the money, she's asking, I guess there was a $50,000 annual pay rate, which, by the way, seemed low to me. Like, you're Lady Gaga's personal assistant and you're only getting $50,000 a year. Okay.
She ended up getting $75,000 a year the second time she came back.
Whoa, shoot now. Break out the Louboutins. Okay, so $75,000 a year. But all that to say, with Gaga earning as much as $80 million at the top half of this year, it still pales in comparison. So I don't know. She's claiming that she's owed money for non-payment due to overtime, but I don't know. Maybe she's just kind of pissed that the salary's low in general.
Obviously, this case is severe enough that it wasn't dismissed, which at
Right.
first I thought it would be dismissed, and a trial judge said it can go to the jury in November, so that was surprising to me. But the biggest thing I take away from this is you don't mix friends and business.
Right.
This was a friend and former roommate, and a lot of these things that she's claiming were her job, Lady Gaga in her mind could have thought was being a friend. They
Right.
shared a bed in a hotel room often, and Lady Gaga would fall asleep to a DVD and say, "Can you get up and turn off the DVD?"
Right.
To me, that's a friendship thing. To her, that was a work thing. Like, "Oh, will you get up
Girl.
and turn off the DVD for me? I'm sleeping." Like, not to me, but I'm saying there's a line between her. I don't abuse my friends. Don't
I was
worry.
gonna say, Mari,
But there's
remind
a
me not to come
line.
sleep over at your house because I'm
But
not turning
she's
off
complaining about
a
things.
damn
It's
thing.
like she's complaining like, "Oh, she made me turn off her DVD at night. Oh, she made me like carry her luggage." You are a personal assistant, and I don't know. This is why you're not mixing friends and business, because there probably was a blurred line between are you being a friend right now or are you being paid for this right now?
Well, I don't know that I buy that premise, Mari, but I will say it's sellable. It's sellable to a jury, and because it's sellable, like you said, that's why the case wasn't dismissed and could essentially move forward. All right. Well, this was fun. Did you like that? Did you like the buzzing?
Yes, because I had to speak my mind even faster than I normally do.
Exactly.
And it's gonna be hard for me to just like be like, "Oh, and I don't want to add one more thing." One more thing.
You're cheating now, Mari.
I'm cheating only because I'm looking forward to this trial. I can't believe that it's not being settled, because most people settle these cases. Most of these high-profile celebrities settle them because they don't want their private life
And
to
it
be
might
out on
end up being
public.
settled before. But go ahead.
Yes. But if it's not, I would love to get that view into Lady Gaga and what she's actually like, Stefani Germanotta.
Yeah. I could see her deposition
Can you
now.
imagine
Yeah.
her on stand?
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, I just want to see the deposition tape. That would probably do it for
Yeah.
me. That's exciting. All right, so apparently, obviously, Attorney Chris Chestnut, the attorney in the case of the week for us, he's on the East Coast. It looks like I was getting some text messages from him during the program. He was in a meeting. He was trying to call in desperately. This is not the last time we will talk about this case at all. We will definitely be keeping you abreast every step of the way, from whether the grand jury indictment to the arraignment of this officer and moving forward. So we'll definitely get this attorney on the program soon, and can't wait to see how this thing unfolds.
Yes, and I want to say two things. Next week, we have a very special guest joining us, Mark Garagos, who is attorney to several of the stars that we talk about on this show often. Chris Brown, P. Diddy, Mike Tyson, lots of
Yes.
people. So it'll be a very interesting interview. And also, please, everyone, go on to iTunes, rate us 5 stars.
Comment. Even if you disagree, that's always fun too.
Yeah.
We love to read your comments on air and address those.
We try to respond to everyone. YouTube, if you leave your comments, we will respond to you. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much for listening.
Yeah,
and
thanks,
join
guys.
us next week.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, Dario Kristen, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network. If you have questions or comments, tweet us at BHL Online or email us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. For more exclusive content, visit blackhollywoodlive.com. This has been a presentation of the Black Hollywood Live Network. The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.